What if your mood, skin, bloating, and energy struggles weren't random, but messages from your gut? Today's guest went from years of antibiotics and normal labs to discovering the deeper truth. The gut is the foundation of your immune system, your hormones, and your brain health. If you've been dismissed, confused, or bloated with no answers, this episode will finally help you connect the dots. Women's Wellness Authority is your go-to podcast for discovering the hidden gems of holistic health and well-being. In each episode, we dive deep into the many layers of wellness, from mental and physical health to spiritual growth. Through insightful interviews with experts, healers, and thought leaders, we uncover alternative approaches, healing practices, and fresh perspectives that empower you to transform your life. Whether you're seeking innovative ways to heal your body, your mind, or nourish your soul, this podcast offers practical tools and wisdom to help you thrive in all areas of your life. Let's rewrite the rules of wellness together. Step into your power, reclaim your health, and discover what it means to truly thrive from the inside out. Welcome back to Women's Wellness Authority. I'm your host, Diana Ruskowski, and today we're talking about something almost every woman deals with but rarely gets real answers about, and that is your gut health. If you've struggled with bloating, brain fog, stubborn weight changes, skin issues, or anxiety, and you were told that your labs looked quote-unquote normal, this episode is going to give you some clarity. My guest, Kate Ricciardi, lived this firsthand. After years of antibiotics, chronic stomach issues that started in childhood, and a major postpartum crash, she discovered that her gut was the root cause that everyone had overlooked. Now she helps women understand what their symptoms are really trying to say. So today we're going to be breaking down what the gut actually does, why bloating happens, the gut-brain connection, foods that support healing, and what testing finally can give you the answers that you need. And so if you've been searching for the why behind how you feel, this could be it. So let's dive in. Thanks for joining us, Kate.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
So in every episode, I always love to, before we kind of dive into the topic, sort of dive into your personal story. How did you get into the profession of really helping people heal their guts?
Oh gosh, yes, because my own forever long struggle with all of this, I can remember going back as young as 12, having like gut issues, not really knowing what was going on, just so, my stomach hurts a lot and being told, well, maybe you're lactose intolerant, so just avoid, ice cream and cheese. And as a 12-year-old, like, who wants to give up ice cream? As early as I can remember all of those things happening, and then being a runner in high school, having gut issues because of that. Yep, that's a thing. Then being in college, oh, you're stressed and you're busy. You don't get enough sleep because you're a college student. Like, there's always a reason to explain it away. But knowing what I know now of when I was a kid, infant, toddler, little kid, ear infection, strep throat. I feel like I lived on amoxicillin, like that bubblegum liquid was always in my fridge. It just seemed like it was just a constant there. It was a staple. And so that now explains a lot, right? We know one round of antibiotics can take out so much of our microbiome.
I don't think actually people do realize that. We should talk about that a little bit, because I've gotten comments in the past when I've talked about it on this podcast. I had no idea that antibiotics actually destroys your gut lining.
Yeah, it's wild. Like, one round it's thought can destroy. I mean, the number kind of fluctuates, but let's say, take an average there, like 82%, right? Like, there's that high percentage there of it's just going to kill everything. An antibiotic, it's going to wipe out the bacteria. So
The good and the bad.
yep. And that's where we can see sometimes with those stronger antibiotics, not necessarily with amoxicillin, it definitely can happen, but you start getting into some of those stronger ones and you get significant diarrhea, you can get C. diff, right? So there are these other things, these bad pathogens can then overgrow and take hold of things that can be pretty significant. It does quite a number on the microbiome for sure.
So
Yeah.
sorry, I interrupted your
That's
story,
okay.
but
That's okay. Yeah. So then as a teenager, I had horrible acne. And so I was given every antibiotic under the sun. So more antibiotics. So then that's explaining, okay, I'm in my teens, my 20s. This is basically, I just had like no beneficial bacteria.
and they're going to just say what? It was hormones.
Yeah, all the things. It's just hormonal acne. This is what happens when you're a teenager and your body is changing and all this stuff. And no, there's so much more. We know more so now, there's more research that has looked into the gut skin connection. And so we can affect it from the inside out. And I really started going through all the antibiotics and then Accutane. I was like, this cannot be how it is. And even the Accutane didn't really improve things for me. So pretty much getting rid of my conventional training and all the things that I was taught in school and really digging into that why, because that was a question that I can never get answered. With my own IBS issues in my 20s and doing the CT, the MRI, the ultrasound, the labs, everything looks normal. You're fine. Oh, maybe your spleen is a little enlarged, but you had a cold recently or whatever. All of these things matter. So digging into that why, I had initially looked into research from that gut skin connection about dairy and its connection with acne. So I cut out dairy. Initially, I was, oh my gosh, I think I was like 26. So I'd been struggling, as a teenager with acne. That just it did for me, really affected my self-esteem and confidence and all that kind of stuff. And I didn't want anybody to look at me and all that kind of stuff. So once I removed that dairy and really went dairy-free, it was like, oh my gosh, like things are actually happening. There's a connection here. So what else can there be? So let's start pulling on the thread to see what other food, inflammation, connections there are and how other things can be changed. So it's definitely been a lifelong struggle, right? Looking at all these things. So my own personal issues, and then even like migraines, the IBS, having reflux, all the things. And it's just, here, take the over-the-counter acid reducers. And okay, was that really helping anything? Not really. I didn't really see much of a difference there. So I get it from a very personal level, what it's like to feel like you're spinning your wheels. I call it the spaghetti trap, where it's just, let me see what sticks to the wall. Does this help? Does it make me feel better? And being on the other side of it now, having the practice that I have to say, you know what, you're not alone. You're not, this isn't in your head, and there are things that you can do about it. So
So it was a culmination of all these events that kind of came together for a light bulb to go off, and then
yep.
you realizing I could help others
Yeah. Yeah.
that are me, essentially.
Yep. And then when I was still going through all of the IBS stuff, and I was now in my early 30s, and it was, okay, well, you changed up the fiber, you've done the low FODMAPs, you did the elimination diet. Well, here's Buspar. Like, okay, well, I don't feel like I'm an anxious person. Like, I feel pretty calm. So, well, you don't have to take it for anxiety. You can take it as an off-label use for gut stuff. So it's like, oh, okay. So like this gut-brain connection, we're doing something here to affect the gut. But as a more holistic minded person sitting on a prescription month over month, and this is just, the best we have, I didn't take that well. Again, starting, what other continuing education things can I do? Because what I learned with the elimination FODMAP, like I said, that wasn't doing it. So really then going deep down the rabbit hole for integrative functional medicine, trying to get those why questions answered, looking at the research. It's hard to find what you want in like one research paper, right? So then going through, well, this one's saying this, and then there's an inflammatory marker here, and then this is associated with this, and then really putting those pieces together. So I feel like sometimes I'm just the digestive detective, because we have to look at all these different angles and combine it all together, because we can't, sometimes you can, right? But finding, okay, here's one research article that supports exactly what I'm looking for. Like, there's definitely an art and a science to blending it all together when we're looking at someone as a whole person and not a diagnosis and all that kind of stuff, for sure.
And that makes sense because everybody's body is different,
Yep.
right? So you can't have a one size fits all from a medical perspective and then from a holistic approach. I think it makes total sense. Thank you for sharing your story. Can we maybe start with the ABCs of the gut and really break down what is your gut, what's the gut's function in the body? Because it is connected in so many ways that I think people don't realize.
Yeah, I like to say that we're looking at it from that 30,000-foot view. It's like the hub on a wheel, right? You have that thing in the middle, and all the spokes are coming out from that, and then you have the tube and the tire. Everything is connected from that. So that's where so much, our microbiome lives there. It's thought that we have more bacteria cells than we do have, our human cells. So they really run so much of the show when it comes to our different body processes. What happens like with the thyroid, we need the microbiome, quote unquote, good bacteria, right? Because there's going to be some that have benefits, and then there's opportunistic ones that hang around, and we want to nurture.
This is all within the gut,
Yep.
you're saying. And then when you say microbiome, what does that mean?
So that's really like your gut garden, all the bacteria that are going to be in there. So we have the beneficial bacteria that help, things like immune support, metabolism, neurotransmitters, all of those kinds of things. But then there also can be some of those opportunistic bacteria, as they're called, like the bad ones, right? Where they can be the ones releasing methane gas, hydrogen sulfide. So then you can start to get into a SIBO. This is where sometimes those symptoms can come in with bloating or constipation, gas, feeling just distended and like puffy or thick, where those
And
bacteria.
that's an overload of those bad bacteria in the microbiome in the gut.
Yeah, like you can do stool testing to look at what's going on there. What is your balance? Or then there's something, is it just within, like, the large intestine is where we want to see the bacteria, right? But sometimes if there's an overgrowth, there's some sort of injury or nervous system involvement, there can be a variety of different reasons why something like SIBO happens. And that's when the small intestinal bacterial overgrowth happens. So we don't really want those bacteria in the small intestine. We want to keep them in the large intestine. So that, I feel, is becoming more acutely looked at, especially when someone says, I have IBS-like symptoms. Is it really IBS? But like, why is the gut irritable? What's going on there? Is it because of inflammation? Is it because there's an overgrowth? So I've been seeing more diagnoses of SIBO pairing with, I would say, the bloating and constipation type symptoms, just feeling like, oh, I have slow motility. Things aren't really moving through the tube, as I call it, as fast as they should. I've had clients where they're saying, oh, I've had one bowel movement a week or something like that, and I just feel like I have a brick inside, and they're important to pay attention to.
Yeah, and don't worry, listeners, we're going to talk about poop in a little bit and what it all means. I have the silly question, but is the stomach the gut, or it's part of the digestive system? Because you mentioned the small intestine, the large intestine, and I never thought about it in that way, that you're supposed to have certain bacteria in each of those locations because they serve a certain function. But if it interacts in places it's not supposed to, then that's where you can experience these issues.
Right. It's kind
Yeah.
of like, wrong place, wrong time, right? We don't want the bacteria to be so much in the small intestine. We want to keep them in the large intestine. Like our stomach, that has its function. It's going to start to break down food. We're going to start to break down our proteins and all that kind of stuff. We have stomach acid there, help kind of sterilize the things that come in if there's any sort of pathogen coming in on food. So the gut health realm, I think, now is talked about in the way of just the bacteria. And here, take a probiotic and take a prebiotic and the fermented food. But I like to look at more of the digestive system on the whole instead of just focusing on the gut health, because there's still other things like digestive enzymes and stomach acid that also can be players as far as all of these other things and why the symptoms are happening. If we don't have enough stomach acid, where, someone's really stressed, that can affect our stomach acid, then you're not going to be able to digest food as well, right? It can't be as, sterilized as we want it to be. So there could potentially be an opportunity for SIBO-like symptoms then to happen, right? Because things aren't being sterilized where we want them to go. Definitely looking at that digestive system, I think, is.
It's so interesting because you need to look at all those systems together, right? To get a better explanation of what's going on. And sometimes when you go to a specialist, they're only going to look at one portion. And so maybe that one portion looks okay, but you're not feeling right because of all the symptoms that you've been having. I love that you're looking at it from a whole picture perspective to trying to get to the actual root cause, because the antibiotics or medications that you're going to be on are really going to mask that versus actually healing and fixing that, right? One of the questions I had was about immunity. So the immune system, I learned, is like your gut controls a very large portion of your immune system. Can you talk about that a little bit and what that means?
It's thought that, roughly, again, let's say kind of 85%, because it can be different for everybody, right? So that generality of numbers there, about like 85% of the immune system can reside in the gut. And so that is going to have so many implications for our microorganisms, how they regulate our immune system. So those white blood cells that we have there, where our immunity is coming from, a lot of that there is in the gut. And so when we think about what we can do from that bacterial level, like I said, the fermented foods, right? That's going to be a great place. We want to feed those gut bacteria. You can bring in more probiotics, but feeding with prebiotics, the good gut bacteria, that's going to be helpful to cultivate that beneficial environment there. So, our bone marrow is another place where our immune system comes from. But yeah, a lot of it
Is
is
from
in
the
the gut,
gut.
actually.
So if you're on antibiotics, when you stop them, should you be taking a probiotic or prebiotic? And Could you also explain what is the difference between a pre and a probiotic? Is it okay that they're together? Should they always be separate? Do you take one at a different point? I'm used to a probiotic. Prebiotic is new to me.
So probiotics, that's when you're bringing more of the bacteria, like the good, quote unquote, good bacteria, right? You're bringing those into the system. And so there's debate out there, how many of these actually do survive the GI tract? We see a lot of these probiotics in the refrigerated section in grocery store. Well, our body isn't refrigerated. So if they need to be refrigerated, how stable are they and can they get through the GI tract? So it's questionable. So if they make you feel better, great. I've seen it more where probiotics, if there are other gut things going on, and the first thought is, well, you just need more probiotics. It can actually upset things and kind of make bloating type symptoms worse. So it's never a first recommendation if there's truly gut stuff going on. Bloated, constipated, those are by far and away the two biggest things. And then diarrhea, I would say, would come in as a third as far as pain points that women have specifically. Yes, probiotics can be great if you want to bring them in. I really like if someone wants to experiment with this, where you start with more of a soil or a spore-based probiotic, and those are going to go in and seed the gut a little bit more. They tend to last longer. Research has looked at about 21 days that they can survive in the GI tract. So then you're starting
Sorry, what is it called?
the spore or the soil-based probiotics.
Okay.
So there's 3 of those, and they start with the name Bacillus. We'll see that on any of the labels, or
Yes,
like a
I've
B.
seen that.
clausi or subtilis. We'll see the B there, which is different than the bifido strains. And typically those products too will say it's a soil or spore-based probiotic. And so they tend to last a little bit longer in the gut, and that can give you more of an opportunity then to feed. So the fermented foods, that's like, nature's prebiotic, because those are the things that are going to feed the probiotics. So they're helping to create it, because if you're just taking a probiotic, but you're having a regular diet of processed foods and maybe have an apple here or there, then you're not really giving the gut the things that it needs to survive, right? Like if we have a plant, we don't really water it very often, or we don't give it the sunlight that it needs, or one out of 3 things, right? If we're not fertilizing it, then it's not really going to thrive as well, right? It's going to struggle a little bit. So that's kind of the visual real world analogy. I think that can make it make sense a little bit more. Those prebiotics, yep, like apples, Jerusalem artichokes, greener bananas are some, cocoa. Those are some things, the fermented foods being the biggest category there, to help feed the gut microbiome, to feed those probiotics that we have.
And when is the right time to eat the food or take the actual probiotic supplement? Is it at night? Is it in the morning, before you eat, after you eat?
Well, it can be interesting if there's just, I want to try to do something, be more proactive, right? Because it can definitely be very situational. So I would say if someone wants to try adding in probiotics because of the potential for gas that can be produced, right? Like you're introducing something new to your microbiome, you're most likely, especially if you give it consistently, like about 2 weeks, then you can hedge off some of those symptoms if you do take it in the evening, because then you're sleeping. And so some people like that strategy. I'll do that with a prebiotic fiber. I'll take that because I know I feel a little bit more bloated when I take it. So it's like, I'll just do that in the evening when I don't really care, because I'm like, am I sweating for whatever? And then it's just overnight, and then the next day starts again. So I like that as a strategy, just being practical about it. But really there's no, right or wrong time, if there's some sort of medication potential interaction, but not usually a thing with probiotics. If you are taking an antibiotic, there's a different type of probiotic called S. boulardii that can be taken with an antibiotic to help support the gut. So if my kids, knock on wood, we haven't had an antibiotic around here in a very long time, but if we needed it, then there's a couple brands like over the counter that you can grab, like Publix or grocery store, CVS.
So you do while they're taking the antibiotic,
Yeah.
not wait till after the fact.
Yeah. So that can help, especially like if kiddos are a little bit more sensitive perhaps, and get so that antibiotic-induced diarrhea, then that can help to stop that. So that can be a good thing as a strategy to take. And it even says, documented on the little package that you can take it while taking an antibiotic. But always double check, whatever the situation is, because depending on the type of probiotic it is, that might, not be indicated or whatever.
My youngest's diet is not great. She doesn't really like vegetables. She said God didn't make her that way, and and she'll do fruit, but I do a probiotic, and then I do as many greens as I can in like a smoothie. So
Yep.
I'll just have to make sure that it's the right probiotic that I'm giving to her? Because I'm thinking if your food is kind of destroying, if I can help in any other way and you'll actually take it, then.
Yeah, you do what you can, and it can be so tricky with kids too, so
What about gut inflammation or like the term leaky gut? What does that mean? And how would you know if you had one?
I think you would know because you're not feeling like you know your body best, right? So you know when something feels off. But I've also had people say, you know what, it's been so long since I felt well. Like I feel like this is just my new normal, right? This is my baseline, just feeling low energy, kind of foggy, having a hard time concentrating, just slow to get out of bed in the morning. Now, there could be many reasons for all of these things, but really looking from a gut perspective. And I look at it from, this is the root of so much, like coming back to that hub on a wheel
Yeah.
where, okay, these things are off. We know that there's something going on here, right? Or you get frequent headaches, maybe you have eczema or like rashes or things like that because the gut can be, connected to so many things. Then that would be the first place like, hey, I do have some symptoms here. Things aren't quite right. So let me, start to look a little bit deeper. What can I do for my gut? But when we're thinking about the actual term leaky gut, what's going on there is if we think of our intestines, like I said before, through the tube, right? So we have a barrier basically going in, coming out. We want food to pass through. We're going to take our nutrients and then excrete what we don't need. So we want that to be nice and strong. And so the analogy I always use is my hands, right? If we think about our knuckles as these little junctions that we have in the gut to keep all the little villi together, because we know we have this gigantic intestine that can take up a tennis court that we're squishing inside of our skeleton. And so it's going to be all bunched up. When we have these junctions there keeping it together, with inflammation, those little junctions can get weaker. And so then that barrier that we have that we want things going through the tube, it starts to get a little bit loose. So that's where we can start to get, if there's an immune reaction, an inflammation reaction, it's happening within the gut from the exposure to the food as it's being digested and broken down. We can start to get some of those chemical mediators that the white blood cells are releasing. They can slip through, and then now they're able to go through the bloodstream. And that's where we can start to see.
And they shouldn't have been able to go through to begin with.
Yep. So it's about more than just the pro and the prebiotics when we're thinking about it. Gut lining is something I feel like that's not really talked about. And it's something that's really important to help bring, if you're going to do the work, right, we want to do all of it so that you can have those lasting changes that you want. Bringing that together when we're first calming things down from an inflammatory standpoint. And then also, what's happening with the nervous system? Because if we ignore that when we're in either fight or flight versus getting into that rest and digest, that's going to affect things too. But that leaky gut, when we have inflammation, there's a lot of stress. There's things that are happening there on the inside that we can't see, but we can feel them. That's when, we start to see this splay open a little bit. Things are passing through. And then we start to see more systemic things where it's, it can't be my gut because I'm just feeling like I have frequent headaches or joint pain. But when we start tracing it back, and I've seen this time to time again with the work that I do, when we focus on inflammation, oh, I'm thinking clearer. I had a woman one time, she was maybe early 50s, and she said, I had a paperclip on my desk and I stared at that thing and I could not remember what it was for the life of me. And it, freaked me out a little bit. Am I having like, cognitive changes, early onset dementia? Like, why can't I remember what this thing is called? And it was just that brain fog. And it's just, okay, well, my brain's here. I'm not thinking about my gut, but yeah, it's all connected.
Let's actually talk. That's a perfect segue to talk about the gut and brain connection and how the gut has a massive influence on our brain.
Yep. It's thought that our gut is like our second brain, right? We have this vagus nerve, this massive nerve that runs from our brain down into our gut. It pretty much, goes to our organs. So that can be affected. Trauma can affect it, stress can affect it, like that whole, like I said, fight or flight versus rest and digest, what's happening from that brain, and then going into our gut being like our second brain. When we think about it practically, right? Like, oh, I'm feeling nervous about something and thinking about something. Maybe there's a little bit of anxiety happening, worry, whatever it is, that butterfly in the stomach feeling, right? So like, okay, we're feeling it here, that visceral reaction. Our gut and our brain are connected. And so
Never thought about it that way.
So our gut, it produces neurotransmitters like serotonin, dopamine, and those are things that help to regulate our mood.
The gut produces those.
Yeah.
Interesting. So if someone has massive anxiety, could that be an indication of an unbalanced gut?
Yeah, It can also too, when we're thinking about what the gut is doing, right? So if we go back to like leaky gut, we're not digesting and absorbing our nutrients the way that we need to. So very often there's some sort of nutrient deficiency that happens, like B vitamin, B6 is a big one for anxiety. So yeah, we can see those connections too. So what's going on at the gut? Is it just the microbiome? Is it inflammation like the leaky gut? And we need to work on shoring that up so that we can actually get the things from the food. So we, have the nutrients that we need and actually have that support our whole body down at that cellular level, our brain, all that kind of stuff.
So interesting. With the gut brain connection, and we said, the gut controls so many different parts of the body. What about skin? Because you mentioned that earlier, that acne, you had severe acne, but that was an indication of your gut health as well. So can you talk about that a little bit?
Just the fact that we have these different pilosebaceous units is one of the phrases I remember learning about. It always stuck in my brain from when I was learning about the dairy situation, how what we have there can affect, collagen production, all that kind of stuff. It's thought that when we're thinking of the gut and microbiome, when there's imbalances and it coming out in the skin, okay, if it's a hormone imbalance, like your body's trying to push things out and give you that sign, or, why is that happening there? More on that hormone side of things, and then if there's an inflammatory reaction. This is not my area of expertise as far as like skin mapping and stuff goes, but I'd had a conversation with an esthetician and she was saying, if it's more like on your forehead, that can be more inflammatory. But if there's redness on your forehead, that could be like estrogen, too much estrogen.
So, depending on where you're actually getting the acne is an indication of where there could be issues in your body.
Mm-hmm.
I believe it because,
Yeah.
with reflexology on your feet and your hands, it's representative of your entire body. And
Right.
so, if you work on one area, it actually.
Yeah.
So that's, oh my gosh, that's so, so, so interesting.
Yeah. And I've seen it too, like I mentioned, pushing out stuff, right? Where if I'm working with someone and we're working on inflammation and we're calming things down, then if there's eczema or psoriasis, more often than not, what I've seen is it actually gets worse before it gets better because it's like the skin trying to purge. Because our skin is our biggest organ, one of our detox organs. We sweat through it. And so it wants to help push those things out. It's like, oh my gosh, I feel like I were itchy or more scaly, psoriasis or eczema, and then it gets better. So it's really interesting what your skin can also.
I have a sensitivity to dairy, and I eliminated it from my diet last year or this past year. My skin breaks out from it, and I'm like, obviously, you can't really eat tremendous amounts of it. I do it in smaller portions because I see what it's actually. I like looking at it and just saying, that's my gut telling me, like, idiot, stop eating cheese.
Yeah, I'll get that same thing will happen too. Like I can almost predict within 12 hours, like if we're on vacation and we have ice cream and I have some, and then it's like, yep, there's something that happens right along the
Yeah.
jawline, or I'll see it. It's never up or head or cheeks. It's always lower here. And I see it also with like the food sensitivities, inflammation, those reactions when someone has dairy and they don't know what the cow, right? If it's a conventional dairy cow and that cow is being fed, say, soy, corn, wheat, barley, and they have an inflammatory response to one of those foods, like they should be avoiding soy, but they have a conventional dairy product, bam, it passes through. Those antigens, those proteins can pass through so much more easily in the milk. Just like when we think about, babies who have sensitivities and moms go dairy free, right? Like we can see these reactions happening and then they know, okay, yeah, like I need to go to a grass-fed product, and that can be different because of the feed. And so that can be kind of a gradation of how we want to try still, allowing the things that you want because, hey, I really enjoy cheese. So what if I just switch to a grass-fed cheese versus a conventional? Can I get away with it? Because we should be able to enjoy our food, right?
That's so interesting because I can have certain dairy, and that's probably because I'm also sensitive to soy. That's probably what the cow was just chowing down on, the fake stuff that they give them so they grow faster and all that stuff. So I usually do grass-fed beef, but I did not think about it, how that could affect the dairy aspect. It's all so intertwined, everyone.
Yep. And it's like you got to start just somewhere. What is a low hanging fruit? Because if you're trying to do everything all at once, it's just like a fire hose. And it's like, this was too overwhelming. I don't have time
I'm
to
out.
think about all the
Yeah.
things. So I'm not going to do anything because it's just too much. Low hanging fruit. Like, where can you get one quick win, build that momentum, and then slowly? I think like that's just really the key
Integrate,
when
yeah.
we're doing all the things. Yeah.
Because you talked about you had issues since you were a young kid. I just mentioned my daughter's horrible diet. What shapes gut health like early in life? I've read like all different things, like your gut is built during like 0 to 7. And then after that, it is what it is. But you've got to be able to heal it. So could you maybe just demythicize what I just said and give us a sense of, is there a time frame where your gut develops and is what it is, and then you have to do all the things to kind of maintain and keep it healthy?
Yeah, so I feel like it's an ongoing process. However, there is research that has come out that our microbiome is shaped with how we're born and how we're fed. So if you're a C-section baby versus, a natural birth, you're going to be exposed to different germs, right? If you're not coming through the birth canal and you're not getting inoculated with the mom's microbiome essentially, then you're going to have a different microbiome profile as a toddler as you grow. So then it depends on what do you do, what would the parent do to nurture that. And so both of my kids are C-section kids, and that's something that I'm acutely aware of now. It's like I had no idea. Like I don't even think I knew back 11 years ago that was really the case because I wasn't looking into it that deeply at that point. But now where I am, it's such a different thing. So we focus a lot on their gut stuff. So how you're born and then how you're fed. Were you formula fed? Were you breastfed? Combination that can shape it differently too, because the immunity that's conferred, just the nutrients that are conferred from mom to baby versus a formula, it can shape the microbiome differently.
And there's not a right or wrong. It's just that it's different, right?
Yep, it's just different. You want a healthy, fed baby. That's priority number one. And then, there's a lot of reasons why breastfeeding doesn't happen. So it is what it is, and then take that information and where does that fall on your priority list of things to do?
And then for those whose kids are maybe chronically on antibiotics, just kind of do what you suggested, which is take the probiotic while on it and continue that after to help repair the gut after.
If there's always that exposure, doing what you can, depending on the condition, right? Like why someone might be on an antibiotic, there might be different reasons. Like the yeast-based probiotics might not be appropriate. So it really is an individual thing, looking at it more microscopically, but in general terms.
Yeah, I'm just thinking like a normal respiratory infection or cold or, where an everyday kid might go on amoxicillin or be on steroids or stuff for respiratory stuff.
Focusing then on the gut, like after it, like the Escolardi, I really like that, within
Yeah.
a probiotic that typically is okay. So that's something that you can do to be a little bit more proactive at that point in time. And then, what are we feeding? Are we going with what does the diet look like, right? Because kids typically are going to be pretty stress-free. It's like, okay, I had this cold, whatever, I had a URI, if it turns bacterial and you need the antibiotic. I feel like that's something too where there can be an overprescription of the antibiotics because if something is viral, a virus and an antibiotic, they don't match up. So there can be a lot of that. And I've experienced that myself. Like, oh, I have a cold. Oh, hey, do you want an antibiotic for it? Back in the day, no, I'll just do all my holistic things and I'm good. But what does the diet look like, right? If you're low in colors, like I find a lot of times people say, when I actually look at what I'm eating, my diet's pretty tan. It's pretty brown. And there's not a whole lot of color in it. So how can you get the colors in, right? Where we're going to get in from our produce. I like to say, collect your colors. How can we get in something that's red, yellow? And I would do this with my kids too, where, okay, what did we eat that was red today? What did we get in that was orange, that was yellow? So they would be a little bit more like, oh, I know my colors and this is what I can do, and get them starting to think that way.
And that's so basic and so easy to understand versus maybe it's less daunting. Maybe I'll try that because then you're not saying fruits and vegetables. You're just saying your colors. So you could find something that's not in a box.
Right. Right. Yeah.
That's orange or yellow,
Yep.
or red, especially red. What about testing? So if I'm having issues and I've been quote unquote told that my labs are normal, if I'm coming into you as your client, Kate, what would you say to me and what would you suggest? Is that usually like when I come in, we just do some basic testing so you have a baseline of where I'm at?
What I do is an immune inflammatory test. So we're actually looking at the immune system's response to foods and food chemicals so that we can get a very clear snapshot. We're not doing elimination diets, we're not doing low FOD maps or whatever it is, because the inflammatory response for so many different conditions can be benefited from doing this testing so that you know specifically, okay, these are my triggers right now. This is how much my immune system is responding to this thing. These are the things that my immune system prefers. And then we build out a protocol from there. So most people, busy working moms, whether you're a stay-at-home mom, because I think that is the hardest job that there is on the planet. I did it and it was just like, oh my gosh, we're working right outside the home, wherever it is you're working. And you don't have the time for all of the guessing and all that kind of stuff. So we cut through the noise, we look at that, and then that can really be that foundational piece of, we're working from that hub. We are looking at what works for you, because in the functional world, there's a whole 5R protocol, and it's remove, replace. Those are the first 2 R's. So we can do that through an elimination diet, or you can say, let me do the testing and let me know specifically so that I can start calming, because we can't address like the gut lining like we talked about before if the gut is still inflamed.
And I'm still introducing those inflammatory things. Like I'm never going to be able to heal.
I had had a client one time that was taking turmeric for joint pain. And he's like, it's not getting any better. I'm doing all the things. I don't want to do like the standard over-the-counter pain stuff. So I'm doing turmeric, I'm doing ginger. So we did testing. And it turned out that he was super reactive to turmeric. I was like, okay, that explains why we're not seeing the Nina Louvre the way that we want to. So when we pulled back from that, things got better. So it's like, oh man, I thought I was doing my thing. And it really was getting in my way. So
And it's supposed to help with inflammatory response. So that's why it's so important. Yeah, so I did an elimination diet, but I will say it was very time consuming and it was lengthy. I did it for 4 to 5, 6 months, and I still have a sense of what I'm sensitive to, but I never did any official testing to say, yep, it's gluten, it's soy. I mean, I did muscle testing with like my chiropractor, but I never did lab testing. And sometimes I'd go into the office and I was fine because I was literally everything: corn, dairy, wheat, and soy. And then he was like, just gluten. And then I went back again and he was like, everything's back. That test would be really, really good. And you're right. I would just cut to the chase. I would know then what to cut out, and then we can really start building. So do you also do stool testing right off the bat, or that's going to depend on the type of symptom that
yeah.
someone might have?
So I used to do a lot more stool testing than I do now. I found really that when we focus truly on the gut inflammation, the gut lining, and then going, pro and prebiotics a little bit farther down the road, that we don't really need to do it. Now, some people do like it for the data because they want to know, where am I balanced or imbalanced or whatever, to be a little bit more specific. And I've done it too in the absence of testing, because I believe when you take a really good history and you're really paying attention to all the symptoms, that maybe you don't need it, right? Because if it's going to show us that you have overgrowth, we can still eradicate it. We can still do some sort of herbal protocol, no matter what it is. So if you really want to get nitty gritty, if we're looking for something like H. pylori, that's going to be a different protocol. So depending on the symptoms, like, it may or may not be appropriate. But I've definitely seen where when we calm the inflammation down, we work from that gut level, we can affect the microbiome, and we don't need to go down that path because symptoms have resolved so much.
Makes
So really,
sense.
yeah, I definitely have my clients who are data driven. It's like, I want to know all the things, and that's great. And other people are like, what can we do? And I like to say, let's try to do more with less, so that, you're not taking 75 supplements a day and all of the things that can seem really overwhelming. So how can we be more efficient and still get you where you want to be?
Okay, well, since we're talking about stool, let's maybe dive into the poop 101. And what should it look like? How often should you be going? What does it mean when you're constipated, diarrhea, colors, shapes, all the things? Because all those things matter, right?
Right. They do. They do. So listening to this, there's a Bristol stool chart. So I encourage, if anyone's curious for the visual, you can take a look at that and it'll show you there's several different types of poop that we have. So we want to be that 3, 4 on there, right? So what I used to tell my kids was, okay, are we having banana poops, or is it looking like a snake where it's nice and formed? We're not seeing a lot of cracks in it. So that brown color is what we want. And okay, if it is a little cracky, there's a good bulk to it, then maybe we just need to work on hydration a little bit more. But if we're starting to get on that lower end of the scale, like the 1 or the 2, and it's small segments, some people say like, little bunny turds and things like that, and it's just like really segmented, harder to cast, just little bits, then there could be slower motility going on, right? Like a little bit more on the constipation side of things. Things aren't moving through the system as quickly as we want. Hydration usually comes up a lot when someone says, yep, I'm a type 1 or a type 2. Okay, what can we do then on the hydration side of things? Do we need more minerals that you're absorbing better? All that kind of stuff. And then on the flip side of it, if you're more that like 5, 6, 7, that's going to be like fragmented, softer, looser, watery. And then is it stress? I see that a lot more with stress, a lot of inflammation, food stuff going on. Those are the correlations that I tend to see the most there. So I had a guy one time, this was years ago, he thought that a number 7 was just, this is just how I am. And I just have liquid diarrhea. And this was just my baseline, and working on inflammation and shoring things up through food. He's like, this is like the greatest day ever. Like, I didn't know that I can be a 4, right? Because like, we'll look at this chart often. So, because obviously I'm not there to analyze it. So, okay, how are we making progress? What is this looking like? I mean, it was like he won $1 million. I mean, it was just amazing. So
Yeah.
there's, all sorts of different ranges there, reasons why. So again, coming back to like looking at someone's history and really pulling all these different things together, what their diet looks like, but they're all lifestyle too, right? How are you sleeping? What is your stress? Toxins, all of that kind of stuff is going to make a difference. Your environment.
But your poop can be an indication of like a sign from your body. It's
Mhm.
trying to signal to you what's going on. So I think it's good for people to understand like the basics. If you're sick and you have a cold, you'll notice there's changes, right? But this is I'm talking like everyday type. You feel normal and what a typical bowel movement should look like. How about how many times?
So this is an interesting one. So when I was in school 20 years ago, 20 plus years ago, it was, it's normal to have a bowel movement every 1 to 3 days. So it's like, okay, if you're not going but every 3 days, that's a lot of time for that to sit in your rectum for, it can stretch, right? So the PT side of me is thinking of that from the muscular perspective. And then that can affect your sensation because okay, it's stretching, then you don't have the same receptors there and their sensitivity. So then that can just feed that. So pelvic floor PT is something that can be really beneficial as an aside. But ultimately, daily. There are some people out there that say you should be pooping after every meal, which I think can be a bit of a high bar for people to wrap their minds around, especially if they're coming from a place of, I mean, I talk to people who say, I go to the bathroom once every like 2 or 3 weeks, right? So like every meal, that can be just really, really far. And some people do naturally, right? How much fiber? What is your stress level like? How much are you in fight or flight versus rest and digest? But I think a good benchmark would be every day, making sure that it's looking, if you're looking at that Bristol stool chart, like type 3 or type 4 would be the most optimal, that it's not floating, right? Because if there's a lot of floatiness happening, then I'm thinking about things like fat malabsorption or, what is bile flow looking like? All those different things can come into play there. So I would say every day, just because we know, okay, your body is having a bowel movement to release the waste. That's ultimately what it is, right? We're taking out the trash. So we don't want any of those toxins recirculating them because they can adsorb back into the bloodstream. And so especially for women who are thinking about our hormones, how like say estrogen is breaking down, we want to get that out instead of allowing that to recirculate. So let's get that out and then, working on that. I just finished up bloating and constipation clinic, the first round of that. And so a lot of great insight and aha moments came from that as far as just, oh my gosh, I didn't realize, like you're saying, how often I should be going to the bathroom and what my poop should look like and all the things. And because it's just not talked about, right? It seems like so taboo. We don't talk about it, but
It's so
it's something that
important.
everybody needs to do, and you know how you feel, right? Like, oh, I had a complete because that's another thing too that comes up is, I go to the bathroom, but I don't feel like I completely clear, right? And it's just like, well, I kind of went, maybe I can go again. And, that just doesn't feel as comfortable, right? You don't feel it like in your lower abdomen, then you maybe feel a little bit bloated, then you don't like how you feel in your jeans, and then you start thinking about that. And it creates this whole cycle. Getting to that place of the goal being a daily bowel movement, I would say, yeah.
Yeah, we actually talk about this in an episode with Lindsay Clements, and she talks about the fact of how important it is. And I just thought my poop is excreting what it doesn't need from the foods that I eat, but it's also from all my bodily systems. And hormones is a big one, right? So now when I'm getting into a period in my life where I'm in perimenopause and those are in menopause, it's even more important
Yep.
that I'm getting that estrogen out of my body, because if I don't, then it just gets recirculated, and that's where estrogen dominance comes in. So getting that waste out every day is
Yep.
really, really, really important.
Yeah. And I will say too, on the point of estrogen dominance, like your liver. So this is where, like I said earlier, I like not just the gut health side of things, but also the digestive health side of things, because our liver, that, my gosh, is such an underrated, underappreciated organ, I think, where it does so much when it comes to breaking down toxins. It's going to break down our hormones. So when we have a sluggish liver, because, if we're inflamed, we're not absorbing the nutrients that we need. So then the liver's not getting the nutrients it needs to do its job well, right? So then we start to see the snowball happen. And then we can start to see things like, oh, I have a difficulty with losing weight or my PMS symptoms and mood changes, all that kind of stuff. Breast tenderness is a big one, low back pain, all that kind of stuff, like that PMS week. That's just a bear. And I had my own experiences with this too, just regulating hormones, especially after, my second baby. It was just, oh my gosh, all over the place. And the liver does have more of an impact. It takes more of a hit, so to speak, after that second pregnancy, second baby. So that can be a big thing there. And so like PMS for me it was a big thing. And I felt like so snappy and so short, and like the breast tenderness and the low back pain personally. And then really focusing on not just the inflammation, but the liver side of things. that moved the needle. So now, like, okay, menstrual cycle, period comes and it goes, and it's just like,
Yeah, you're not like a monster or
it's
dragon.
not a big deal anymore. It's just a thing that happens that's annoying.
Yeah, I've had to do a lot of work on my liver too for all those reasons. We mentioned just quickly about clean eating and versus like elimination diets. So I feel like we covered elimination diets could be great, but like the testing can just really solve that, get the answers you really want without having to go through the timeliness and the testing and all of that. What about clean eating? What kind of foods should we be making sure that we're eating? I know you talked about like all the colors, but are there particular foods we could be incorporating into our diets on a daily basis that helps build a strong gut?
So we're thinking of like the gut lining. So
Mhm.
fermented foods, if we're thinking of like the prebiotic stuff, right? That's going to be your great place, like the kimchi, the sauerkraut, kefir, things of that nature. But when we're thinking of the gut lining, bone broth, that's a great place. You're going to get more protein there. You're going to get more of that collagen there, which can be a double-edged sword because if you have that stuff going on and you're reactive to beef, but you're doing beef bone broth, we can be 1 foot this way, 1 foot that way. And so it can kind of negate. But the proteins there, hydrolyzed collagen peptides, those are going to be smaller so they can actually get absorbed. They can, be really great for the gut lining and even just tissues in general. I was doing regular collagen peptides for the longest time. And my dental hygienist said, you have a receding gum line here in one of your bottom teeth because apparently, I start brushing on my bottom left quadrant and switching to the hydrolyzed, so it's a smaller molecule when they go and measure when you're getting your teeth clean, what your inflammation and gum tissue looks like. She's like, oh, that went away. Like, okay, like there's actually something to it, like to actually see the proof of the work that I was doing, right? So that was very validating. But the ways that we can build like that collagen from the inside to really support that gut lining can be really great. And then there's all sorts of other soothing things if you're at that point, like marshmallow. And, if there's any pharmaceuticals being taken, that's always something that has to be looked into. Medical disclaimer always. But marshmallow root can be really great. There's a form of licorice that can be used. Again, like blood pressure potentially could be an issue with that. Aloe is another one. So there's some more natural ways to go about it.
Like drinking aloe?
Some people do.
How would you use aloe? Like just putting it on your skin?
Yeah, you can do that from like a skin perspective. There's a charcoal. If I do any sort of detox, there's a binder that I'll use to help, anything that's getting killed off then gets bound up so that it is pooped out and it's not recirculated. And it has some of those gut lining properties in it. So instead of just being like the charcoal, there's white silica in it. There's apple pectin. There's the aloe, marshmallow, quercetin. You get kind of a 2-for-1, two birds with one stone as far as the different things to help support the gut lining.
So I feel like we talked about so many things today, and we kind of went through a healing roadmap and where to start in terms of testing and then all the various ways. But many of my guests that I talk to, it's always so much better to work with an expert like a Kate instead of me trying to figure out and get to the bottom of really what's going on. And people can do that by themselves, right? But is there any harm in people trying to figure that out on their own?
I mean, the time, the emotional, mental toll that it can sometimes take from that frustration. And I was there with, eliminating back in the day where it was like, let me calm my IBS down, is it oats? Is it chocolate? Where am I at? I don't know. And turn out to be really random things. So you can do it.
It just takes probably more money.
More
You're
time, more
right.
investing. I mean, I talk with women who are like, I don't even know how much money on all the supplements and I really feel better. I'm trying to take them all. I'm not consistent because there's so many to remember. And my days get busy, all that kind of stuff. And we don't know what we don't know, right? So, like I mentioned, thinking about, like my headaches, my joint pain. We're not really thinking about the gut. We're thinking of like, okay, maybe I should go take some like chondroitin and glucosamine for the joint specifically. But we start asking that question of why. So, yeah, I mean, holding your hand, answering your questions, just having that guide, I think investing in yourself is really, really beneficial just to know what you can do so that you can then show up the way you want to. So like I'll always ask the people that I work with, who do you want to be? What do you want to do? What do you want to have? Right? More of that subconscious stuff. We get into some of that too because we have such a relationship with food. And sometimes it's just, I don't really want to know because I don't want to give things up. But it's not, what are you giving up? It's what are you gaining? Right? So how are we looking at it? Because
Yeah,
if
it's
you
such a
have
different way to look
nothing,
at it.
right?
I never thought about too, like just getting to the answers quickly can actually save a lot in the long run.
Mm-hmm.
Instead of me like starving myself for 4 months, I maybe could have been having certain things. And that certainly worked for me. But how can my listeners get access to you?
So social media, Digestion by Design is my handle on Facebook and Instagram. LinkedIn is Dr. Kate Ricciardi. Then my website is Digestion by Design. So I have some resources and materials there. You can also just book a link for an initial consult there. We can just start a conversation just to gather, some information, what different options might be, because everyone potentially could have a different starting point, whether it's testing or, hey, you know what, we can just try these things from this call and then see how that goes. And then we can revisit, if you want to do testing options and have a little bit of a deeper dive. So there's definitely a wide variety of options. So I feel like having that initial consultation just to get some of that knowledge and see where you are, get a professional opinion on your individual circumstances and situation can always be a wise choice.
What do you have to lose? I know people who have chronic stomach problems. And so what do you have to lose? Do you continue to feel the same way you felt?
Right.
There's only up from here, especially because of the way that you're attacking the root cause and like actually healing the core of the problem versus just band-aiding it. So do you have any last minute parting words for the listeners?
I think one of the biggest things that comes up with women is don't feel guilty about taking care of yourself, taking the time to invest in yourself, because you will then be able to show up in the way that you want to for everybody else. So that guilt, and I know I personally was in that place too. It's like, oh, I have to take care of everybody else first, and then here I come. But when you think about it, what kind of example then am I setting? And when you start to analyze it, I think from like the third person perspective, I wouldn't want my friend to do and struggle. I would want her, like get it figured out so she can do the things. And I wouldn't tell my daughter that. So I would admit to myself.
I love that. Take care of yourself, prioritize yourself, and don't feel guilty about that.
Pour from a full cup, not an empty one.
Yeah, that's so great. Kate, thank you so much for sharing your story and your expertise today. I love how you remind us that our symptoms aren't random, that they're messages from our body. And when we finally listen, everything can make sense. For everyone listening, you don't have to accept the bloating, the fatigue, your anxiety, your normal labs as your reality. Start with one step, one food shift, one habit, one test. Reach out to Kate. Get answers. Thank you for joining me on Women's Wellness Authority. If this conversation spoke to you, share it with a friend who might need this advice. And don't forget to subscribe on your favorite podcast platform or on YouTube so you never miss an episode. And if you're enjoying the show, a 5-star review would mean the world and also helps more women find us. So until next time, stay curious, stay empowered, and most of all, stay well. Thanks, everyone. Thank you for tuning in to this episode of Women's Wellness Authority. If today's conversation inspired you, shifted your perspective, or sparked something within you, I'd be so grateful if you'd subscribe, leave a review, or share this episode with someone who might need it the most. Have a story of your own or something you'd like to share? I'd love to hear from you. You can connect with me on YouTube, Instagram, and Facebook at Women's Wellness Authority. Please note the content shared on this podcast is for informational purposes only and is not a substitute for medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. Always consult with a qualified healthcare provider regarding your health and wellness decisions. Until next time, stay curious, stay empowered, and most of all, stay well. Thanks, everyone.